And now that even the corporation secretary is involved, but is targeting now head of business. Chair and colleagues, you remember 2 days ago here, I raised a matter regarding recruitment process in NSSF, where it is alleged that when there is a gap, recruitment personnel gaps in a department, Nangovi.
Yes.
She's your sister.
That's not true.
Another staff is called Joel Muganza.
Yes.
Is your brother-in-law.
That's true.
Another staff is called Rashid Waiswa.
Yes.
Is your cousin.
That's not true.
Another staff is called Amanda Acheng.
Yes.
Is your niece.
That's true.
Another staff is called Ayan Rumonya.
Interesting.
Is your nephew.
That's true.
Now, is it a coincidence that you have all these family members and relatives in your department, and they went through a normal, it's not criminal, it's not bad to have your relatives employed where you work, if they have the qualifications, the competence, the experience, and all that. I am looking at the coincidence that you have all these relatives. I've just picked on one department, head of human resource. Is it a coincidence that relatives of the head of department are the ones who qualify and perform better during interviews? I am asking the head of human resource first. I want to see that coincidence.
I don't know whether I will call it a coincidence.
And I will bring others from other departments.
Yeah, I don't think I would call it a coincidence. I think it's the role of human resources in the recruitment process is to ensure the integrity of the process. Like we discussed the last time we were here, decisions on who sits on the interview panel is jointly done between human resources and the recruiting department. So it's not that HR decides whoever comes, neither is it true that the recruitment department decide whoever comes. But what I can guarantee is that it's within our mandate to ensure that the recruitment process is of integrity. And before MD approves for another person to be appointed, he, among other things, checks that the recruitment process has been followed. So in the case of business department, as you said, I would like to believe strongly that all the individuals that have been mentioned, relatives of his as they may be, I would like to imagine they went through a due process. The requirement of the HR policy manual.
Chair,
No.
This is not an issue of imagining.
Don't go to the requirements and imagination.
It's factual. Yes.
You know, I've given you one example of one department.
Yes.
If I had time, I would give you examples in other departments. I just wanted to use one. Do you find it, that coincidence? Why are they, some of them not in finance, some of them in investment? They are all in the department where the head is their relative, their family member.
Okay. I know Geoffrey wants to make a comment on it.
Can you let him make that comment first?
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Initially, I was going to say that the question was unfair, but let me make a comment. Number one, the person that you refer to called Sarah Sajabi joined the fund when I was still in school. So I couldn't have been that powerful when I was at the university to order an institution that I had not worked for to recruit Sarah. So that's one. Okay? So you can go and verify the details that this person joined NSSF around 2004, 2005. I was at Makerere. So that's one case.
Maybe it's the one who brought you.
Number two, she was too junior to even influence that. A entrant. And what can demonstrate to you that you couldn't have been the one is how come I'm able to join this company in 2008 and I grew through the ranks. It could only be because someone is competent. But that's one case. Nivea, like I've said, is not my sister. Rashid Waiso that they talk about is not my brother. I don't know him at all in that sense. Someone having a name that is of your tribe does not make them your relatives. You mentioned Amanda.
Can we let him finish?
Let him finish.
Someone called Ian Lumonya, who happens to be a son of a sister of mine. Ian is not and has never been in my department. The fund advertises a job in investments, I think. Ian, a fresh guy from the university, extremely competent, applies for this job. I do not determine which people sit on a panel for a job in investments, and Ian is doing an amazing job in investments. Sajabe has never headed investments. You mentioned Amanda. Amanda applies for a job in the fund after performing so well at the university. And that job, Chair, for the record, was in HR, okay? So she comes in and works in HR. Eventually, jobs advertised internally, her just like any other person applies, competes, and wins, and the marks are there, okay? Then finally, you mentioned Joel Muganza, who again joins the fund as a driver through HR. I mean, if my influence was that big, a driver is the lowest job at the fund.
Okay.
And it wasn't in my department. The gentleman applies, the gentleman sits, interviews, is given a job as a driver. Years down the road, he applies for jobs internal and qualifies, and that happens to be in my department without my influence. Chair, finally, to answer this question of who constitutes the panel, it is extremely appropriate for any company globally that when you are recruiting as a recruiting department, you'll have some level of say. So what typically happens at the fund is that they will always constitute a panel of about 5 people. But HR will reach out to the recruiting department to send a representative. Chair, this committee can also go and investigate and confirm whether the person that I send on panels to represent the department is related to Sajabi, either by tribe or by blood. So, Chair, in conclusion, I honestly think that it is extremely unfair to vulgarize a situation of individuals that have gone through the school system in Uganda. Jobs are advertised, they apply, so they shouldn't apply for jobs in a company where a relative of theirs works. And like I've demonstrated, all of them apply through departments other than the one that I lead. And eventually, if they end up in my department, Chair, it's not my business. Thank you.
Chair, I said earlier that as I was building this issue, I said it is not criminal, it is not bad to have people related to you where you work. It is not, as long as they qualify, they have the experience, they have all the necessary qualifications. It's not bad. However, let me ask you this question, Mr. B. Have you ever declared any conflict of interest for those that you have confirmed they are your relatives to the management or board of NSS and say, this person is here, but is my brother. This one is my sister.
Maybe before you respond, because he thinks he's being treated unfairly, I'll give you the best example. I am in Parliament, for example, with also a relative, but we came through the right process. What the honorable member is trying to address is not the who,
no,
but the how. So he's trying to address himself to the system, the process, and not the individuals in the department. So he's asking you, isn't it a coincidence? So he's now trying to challenge the process to see are there loopholes in the process, but he's not specifically attacking the personalities of your relatives and their capacity and educational background. Are you now comfortable?
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Yes, I am. So I'm on record, and the right person to confirm to the committee with evidence will be the head of HR, that twice when people were competing for jobs in my department, I sent an email to Milton with the former MD in copy, declaring that for this particular role, I don't want to participate in nominating even people because I've got a relative competing for it. Milton can look for those emails and send you. Thank you.
That's good practice. And for the record, just to add on what the chair is saying, please take this in good faith. I've said I have just used one department head to talk about every department because I have the details of who is related to who in the management of NSSF. You will wonder how I get this information. Now, finally, on the same to head of human resource and maybe the acting ED and the corporation secretary. In your view, this is just one example. If I presented, and I'm sorry I just used your head department, but I have information about all others. If I presented this, but now I presented for one department, what image, what message does it send to the public? This is for you, head of HR, and you, managing director and corporation secretary. What image do you think it sends to the public?
Thank you, Chair. All I can say in response to that question is from where I sit as head of HR, I would be very surprised because I know our staff, I know where they come from, I know the relationships in our staff. I would not, in all honesty, and I'm being as honest as I can, say that the issue of relatives working in the same department or in the same fund is a very rampant one. You've said about different departments and different departments, and I was quickly reflecting about HR, which I had. I can touch my heart and say there is no single relative of mine who works in my department or in the fund. And I've been head of HR now for 6 years. Yeah? So there will be cases. This gentleman next to me heads the department which constitutes more than 50% of the fund. All the branch network and the people at head of his department has the biggest headcount. So in a way, maybe you would expect something like that to happen. But I can tell you, Honorable, with a lot of confidence, it's not a rampant thing. The commitment I make as a core mandate of my job is to ensure that the recruitment process of the fund is of the highest integrity. The processes that we deploy, from advertising to interviewing to the appointments, which MD vets every single appointment, my job is to ensure that it's of the highest integrity. And I can tell you, touching my heart, that for the 6 years I've been head of HR at the fund, I can tell you that we've done everything that we can to ensure the highest integrity possible. But maybe Patrick might want to comment or...
No, maybe Chair, because there is something that I would want to connect to this. I could see Geoffrey was struggling because if I was even in that department, maybe I would find difficulty in disciplining these people. But that aside, you told us, Milton, recently that there was a restructuring of the organization. Just a few minutes before we went for a lunch break, we interfaced with the finance department, And they told us they were never affected by this restructuring, and neither did they go through interviews. The other day, we shared here and discussed about one Mugerwa who was demoted, or rather call it his position, because of the new challenges given the new law. He couldn't stand to the task. Now, I want to build my questions from that background. When this new law came in place, I imagine it must have affected across board. So how come the other finance department did not go through another adjustment? And the information I was given is that for them, they have 5-year kind of strategic plans. Do you think that was reason for them not to be affected by the restructuring? Yes or no?
Can I say that there is no department which was not affected by the restructuring?
But it is on record here.
Let me just explain what
yes.
that means. Being affected by the restructuring is not the same as the restructuring necessitating a change in the structure. What we did as an organization is to say the new law opens up many new opportunities for us. The way we are structured now, are we well positioned to maximize the benefits that these new opportunities bring? Finance people looked at their structure as it is, and they confirmed that the structure is still fit for future. The new law had the highest impact in opening up voluntary space for us. The people where the foot soldiers are to maximize that space are largely in business. So, as you would expect, Honorable, the biggest impact of the restructuring would have to be in the business department, because that's where the rubber hits the road.
Okay, just from there.
A number of complaints, a total of 23. Like I hinted the other time, we had 3 committees during the restructuring. The first committee was communication, make sure staff know everything as it happens. The other committee was called governance and compliance, to make sure we do things according to what the law says and complying with the regulations. And the third committee was implementation. So the governance and compliance committee received 23 appeals, because we told our staff...
How did you manage them? Yeah.
That committee sits...
Which committee? The appeals committee?
We called it governance and compliance, which you can call appeals.
Who is the head?
The head was a gentleman called Isaac Ogwang, who is in this room. So what happens is that committee receives the appeal, it meets the individual who has the complaint, it reviews the substance of the complaint being raised, checks it against what the law says or what the HR policeman says, and the committee gave a verdict. Yeah. The paper that's just given to you, you asked me the other time to supply people who are impacted negatively, so not demotions, or who were redeployed into roles which were lower than them. Mugerwa is just one of them, but a total of 16 people were impacted that way. 16 people out of 650 plus.
Thank you. Did I see a report here? And I would want the document I have seen here is a bit faint. Since he's the author, no, I think the author is Milton. Yes.
Honorable Chairman and honorable members of the committee, I was the chairperson of the committee that considered appeals. I presume you're asking about Henry Travis Mugerwa in particular.
You can even choose to answer any of those you remember, but starting with that one.
Okay. We received an appeal from Henry Travis Mugerwa, and you have raised the issues because he thought that he felt that he had been demoted. We reviewed the paperwork that was presented. And during the organizational review process, what was done is that they would map particular duties that had been affected by the law against individuals. And for Henry Travis, his was the voluntary business manager position. So when it came to the committee, we looked at the paperwork.
How long had he worked there?
Where exactly? Because he was...
You said he was the head.
He was heading, I think he had been there maybe about 3 years. I can't recall, but maybe about 3 years. And when the paperwork came to us, what we did was to map what was affected by the law with what he was doing to get, whether he fits or not. And our recommendation as the appeals committee was very clear, because from what we saw as the duties that were supposed to be undertaken, we thought that he was a match for that. That was our committee's recommendation. Yes, but then the process was such that it went to another committee, which was the EXCO committee, and I believe there was another discussion at that committee. But ours, that I can speak to in our report, is what we saw.
Which discussion? Let's go to the tail end.
The tail end.
Yes. Which discussion do you believe?
Believe? Okay, I can speak for the committee.
Who was in the EXCO that is part of this meeting?
The former MD. It had the corporation secretary. It had the head of people and culture. It had the DMD, caretaker MD. That was the team that was there. And we also went in to make presentations.
Now that the former MD is catching up with lunch, can we ask the caretaker?
My apologies, what was the question?
Okay, let's ask the former managing director, since he was around. Having lunch, he was with the police.
Mr. Chair, Honorable Chair, and Honorable Committee members. It's never a good experience with the police, but it was bearable. I think the question was what happened to Travis at the committee of EXCO.
By the way, just for, you can even talk about others, because as a committee we have information. I can mention on the list we have, there is one Faith Chimuli, there is Derek Sebale, there is Adolf Baguma, and others. And you have just confirmed that there were about 21. Okay? But we're just looking at this as an indicator to how the human resource is managed and how do you manage disputes and complaints and so on. And we've just gotten information from the chairperson of the appeals committee. He can be put in that position, but you changed it. Why did you change it?
I think the committee changed it. I can't remember the specifics. As you can say, I've been out of this and I haven't looked at the documents. But what I know is that at that committee, what happened is that then you had senior people who then looked at other evidence, and I suspect that the other evidence might have led to something else. So the process of actually coming to EXCO was a very good one, because you go through the committee that has specifically been set up for this, then it comes up to the supreme body of management that then looks at all the other activities around there. If I recall correctly, the job of voluntary in the old structure and the job of, what are we calling it these days, the new one? Yes, senior manager voluntary, there is a huge difference in terms of what, because a lot of...
Just hold it, my brother.
Sorry.
That position, looking for some other person. But
Scoping.
now, I want to know, the acting person, is he a new person in the organization?
Sorry, he's not new in the organization.
Now we are looking at a case where Mugero was heading.
Yeah.
He's demoted. Now the one who was not even heading is the one acting. Is there fairness?
By the way, we are using the word demoting, I think not accurately, if I may say it. Mugerwa was assigned a new job, not the voluntary one, because of what Richard has just explained. The requirements of the new voluntary role were significantly different. However,
we are still on the issue of the requirements.
Yeah.
The one acting has the requirements.
No, it doesn't. So the choice, just to be clear to you, would be, do we keep Mugerwa in this job as an acting person, or should we give him a substantive job? And for the good news, he got a substantive job, which was initially a grade lower than what he was. Because of his performance, he's now in a job exactly at the same level as where he was. So he's no longer operating as a demoted staff.
Actually, my point, Chair and colleagues, here is to see how does this affect the human resource? Because you've seen the back appeals committee recommends, along the way, you're dropped, and then someone who maybe was not in the position then because the voluntary call it position was with Mugerwa. Now he's not there, there is another one acting. By the way, the purpose we are looking at is how does this affect the performance of the human resource? And we are picking just one, but the committee has evidence of the many that I've told you, among others. So it is a case for management to pay attention to. What is your opinion, HR? Can we say that there was some lapse in that instance?
I think what I can say, Mr. Chairman, is that management took some decisions which, in our judgment, reflected the best interest of the staff concerned. As I said earlier on, we had a choice of either telling this gentleman that the new job is a scope that you do not have, you don't meet the criteria, but you can stay in it as a caretaker, or we could give him a substantive job so that his heart is settled. But we take feedback from you. It's always a learning process. Maybe
later you'll have to tell us about training. If you had taken him for further training, knowing his previous performance, maybe would have said he was for that. But let me draw my attention to Geoffrey. You left campus, like you had told us. Immediately, that's when you got a job at the fund?
Yes, the fund is my first employer.
Which year was that?
2008 is when I graduated in January. I joined the fund around August of the same year.
Yes. You had done a degree?
Yes.
In?
Bachelor of Arts in Social Sciences.
So when did you get that position of business, head of business?
2017, head of department role.
Are you sure? I want you to be sure.
I'm extremely sober. I became head of department in 2017.
He told us that for you to be a head of department, you have to have a master's degree or the equivalent and above.
That's true.
2017. Did you have that qualification?
By 2017, I'd not finished my MBA. Now I do have it.
How did he get there when that is the criteria?
That's not for me to answer.
Now I'm asking him.
Yes, I know he's looking at me. How did he get there? The other day when we were here, I explained how the...
My brother, we are looking at credibility.
Yeah, and I'm being as...
This morning when you are not here, for the record, the chair indulged us because when you're here, we are concerned about outside there, the public's perception about the fund. You know, is it losing because of the perception? And for us as a committee, we are committed to making sure that whatever we bring out is for the betterment of the fund. So that's the confidence we'd want to bring to the public, the savers. So when I'm asking you, that's the purpose. Even the systems should be credible. So how did my brother Geoffrey skip that?
Thank you. And I very much appreciate the spirit with which you ask these questions, because we are all on the same side, making the fund a better place for its members and its employees. So I completely appreciate that. Appointments of heads of department and other senior-most positions at the fund are a preserve of the board. So the board, in its wisdom, decided to appoint Geoffrey into the role of head of department. The board, they are very aware of the provisions of the HR policy manual, but the board is the board.
Clarification, the board is here. It's represented here.
Maybe corporation secretary appointing someone who doesn't have the qualifications, would this be irregular, lawfully?
Thank you, Chair and members. It would be dependent on the provisions of the guiding principle. If in this case, my colleague is citing the HR policy, if the policy provides for that as a qualification, then it would be irregular. But the policy is set by the board. The board has the mandate to amend policy. If the board, in its wisdom at the time, determined to act otherwise, and I'm not familiar with the circumstances of this fact, it was well within their mandate. I'm speaking from a governance perspective, but I'm not familiar with the facts.
But it would be reflected in the resolutions.
Absolutely, absolutely.
In the event that it is not reflected in the resolutions, it would mean they were actually not aware that this member didn't have the qualifications, and the name was merely submitted to them for approval.
If that's what happened. So it's dependent on the facts, which I'm not familiar with.
Okay.
Thank you.
It talks about the authority of the board to make appointments and the authority of the board to amend the policy. But there is also a possibility that the board can make decisions that are not in consonance with their own policy, okay, without first amending the policy. Then that becomes irregular. And it becomes your responsibility, because you are their technical officer. You are their legal advisor, that what you are deciding, by the way, is against your own human resource policy that says ABCD. So you cannot run away from this. Did they amend the policy, or they made a decision that was contrary to their own policy?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, Honorable is absolutely right. In the event that the board has to act contrary to the policy, there's got to be full disclosure. So they make a decision with the knowledge. I was not at the fund at the time. That's why I said I'm not familiar with the circumstances of the case. I would need to check the minutes, but you're right, Honorable. That's what it should be. Either full disclosure, so a conscious decision is
Do we have these minutes, Clerk?
Thank you.
Which year was this? Did you submit the minutes?
2017, Chair.
Do we have the minutes, Corporation Secretary? Did you give us these minutes?
Chair, we submitted the minutes from 2017 to date, so they should be there. But I would need to check now the particular minutes.
Okay, Honorable must kindly conclude.
Why we are diving into all this is that this task of restructuring was in anticipation of the new law, and in order to make sure the fund, human resources, frugal to handle the challenges. Given these, do you think the restructuring added value? We want confidence, geo-mapping. And from the information he has shared with us, I want to believe it was well intended. what was its purpose? Just to have knowledge. What was the purpose of the geo-mapping system?
Thank you. Chair, when I became head of the department in 2017, I found when there had been an attempt twice to procure a solution called geo-mapping. The intention of it was to map all employers across the country. The fund was facing a challenge where every time you got a new staff to be in charge to take charge of a particular area, they struggled to find where specific employers are located. So there was a benchmark with, I think, National Water or Umeme, who are using geo-mapping technology, where they are able to map the meters. So even if you're not aware of where that particular meter is, through geo-mapping, you can precisely locate that place. So the initial two attempts had actually failed, because the perception then within the organization was that the system was intended to track staff. And of course, staff would not love to be, tracked. So eventually, there was another attempt, and through the procurement, geo-mapping was, brought on board.
Okay, good. Let's pick it from there.
Okay.
You said this was 2017.
17. By the time I took over, the conversation was there.
So you were appraised, or you were updated with those requirements and intentions and objectives of the system.
Yes.
The procurement had been done already?
It had been initiated, but it hadn't gone through fully.
Gone through.
Yeah.
Finally,
it got through.
The best evaluated bidder, at what cost?
The cost that I recall, but of course we can give you the specific figures, should be around 880 million. About that, yes.
Did it, procurement, we are in tandem, that is the right information?
Yes, Mr. Chairman and member.
So, do we have...
Mr. Byarugawa and our very good friend from culture, Milton, kindly tell this committee how you decided to take your team to Dubai for team building and how much it cost the saver. And we also wish to know, yesterday the board members told us they wanted to increase their allowances, and they hired a consultant. And when we asked them who the consultant was, they said management is the one that did it. So tell us, which consultant did you hire to go and benchmark on how to increase the board members' salaries or allowances, and how much did it cost the SAVE?
Mr. Chair, I would like both questions to be given to the head of People and Culture.
Mr. Chairman, let's start with Dubai. For the last more than 10 years, the policy and practice at the fund is that once every year, every employee is allocated a figure of 2 million per head. Usually, staff use this money to do team building in any places within the country. Over the years, staff decided that, if we have a budget of 2 million per head, how about if we top up, add another one, contribute $1 million each or 2 million each, so that we are able to go, say, to Mombasa or go outside the country at our cost. So a number of departments have been doing that for the last God knows how many years. Now, HR department, we are about 80 people. Out of that 80 people, about 80% of us are what we call fixed-term contractors. Those are people who come to do work on a specific project. When the project is done, they go back. We have a big project that has been running in the fund for a number of years, records digitization. We are moving towards a paperless organization. So we needed a lot of young men and women to come and help us in that project. Now, because their job is relatively low in the organization and it's, it's not full-time job, the salary is low as well. So that category of staff cannot afford to top up their 2 million to go outside countries. So whereas other departments have been doing it, the People and Culture Department had never done it. And yet the young men and women who work with us have that desire and yearning. So last year, in a departmental meeting, because people can't top up, we agreed, or the team agreed, that rather than going to, usually people go to Mbarara or Kabale or whatever, rather than going to Kabale like we've been doing every year, or Jinja, let us sacrifice our team building for this year to save the 2 million. So that in the next financial year, when we are allocated another 2 million, we now have our balance of last year, add on to this one, it gives us 4 million, so we can also go out like other departments who can afford to top up. And that's what happened. So the previous financial year, all departments had their team building except People and Culture. So that 2 million was carried forward. In the new year, now we all had 4 million. 4 million is not enough money to take people to Dubai and spend time. But then, as the leaders of the department, we had to work with these travel companies to find a budget airline which can give the lowest airline price, to work with them to give us, a hotel downtown Dubai which can fit within that small budget. So the long story short is that the policy of the fund is that team building of once every year, 2 million per head. The staff of People and Culture, because of their level of earning, sacrificed the previous year, and that's the money that we used.
Mr. Milton.
Yes.
Apart from that 2 million, you're talking about how members contributed it. There was also money that was got from the fund for this activity. That is what I am asking. I'm not asking about how they topped up their money. That is up to them. I am asking about the money you got from the fund to take your team to Dubai.
That's what I was explaining, Chair, that the fund pays 2 million per staff per year. Mm-hmm. So the 4 million all came from the fund.
So how many staff did you take abroad?
We were 83, I think, 83. The entire department.
Okay.
People.
Yes, sir.
We have just been here with the head of finance and his team, and they stopped calling him acting, they said, caretaker. They took us through your financial management systems. If you have a budget as a department or end user in NSSF, and you don't spend that money, you lose it. Isn't that what you said? I want clarification on how the 2 million per person in your department that it was not spent the other financial year was carried forward to another financial year to make it 4 million.
Can I answer that? It may help a bit clarify. Honorable, there is also, within the accounting standards, even as we do it, there's something called provisioning, where if a commitment is made in the current year, you then provision that, even if you're going to spend it the next year, as long as you have enough documentation for that. So what you find, that is a very common practice where provisioning is done, and it has to pass the master of your auditor, that actually you should be provisioning that as a contingent liability. So that happens.
Okay, this 4 million was for how many people? How many staff?
The 4 million was per head, and we are 83.
83.
Yes.
That is around 328, 300 and something.
Yeah.
That NSSF gave you. Where did you pay this money?
The whole thing, Mr. Chairman, was organized by a tour company. So the tour company was responsible for doing the tickets, was responsible for hotels, was for everything.
Okay.
So we didn't.
The tour company was called Holidayscapes, not so?
That's correct.
NSSF paid these Holidayscapes only 200 million, which you signed. So did it remain with your balances?
I know that Holidayscapes didn't take the full amount. I know that some money remained in the finance department because we don't touch the money. It goes straight to the...
Do we have finance here?
I think they are still here.
Are they here? Did they all go to police?
Solidarity with their boss, maybe.
You want to comment about this? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. But earlier on, when we were meeting with you as investments, we committed to sharing some documents and they have arrived. And I want to put it on record that we are submitting the no objection of the loan to Uganda Clays as 11.05 billion. We are also submitting the valuations of Uganda Clays.
As chair, that geo-mapping system, you manage it under your department?
No, that's still managed by the vendor.
Sorry?
Still managed by the vendor.
Still managed. What is its performance? Don't you have an oversight role or supervisory role over it as an IT expert?
No. That's managed between the vendor and the department.
So, Geoff?
Actually, it helps. So, internally, there is a contract manager within the department. But what happened is that when COVID-19 hit, the vendor had been able to map about 56% of the employers. The terms of the contract, in terms of the schedule of the payments, they would get their final payment only after they have mapped all the employers. So when COVID hit, with the risk that the contract might expire before they finish, they got an extension for 3 months. Even when that extension was given, they still were unable to map all the employers. So the contract expired. When the contract expired, we sought legal opinion because after the contract expired, the vendor wrote to the contract manager demanding for annual fees and some other money. And in the best of our understanding, we no longer had a contract and you couldn't transact and make any payment without a contract. So our legal department was able to guide us that the money that they were paid was money for what they were able to deliver before expiry of the contract. So,
which later translates into the number of litigations that NSSF has. I'm not sure I heard how many litigations you have or you have had from your former employees and how much you have paid, if you have lost any. But I also found it odd when Mr. Sajabi seemed to think that he was being treated unfairly because a member was asking about relatives that work under him, allegedly work under him. I don't see anything unfair about that because I think it's a question of policy, and I'm not sure I had the company secretary clearly tell us what the HR policy spells out in terms of working, recruiting, relatives, friends, etc. in relation to conflict of interest. And I think for me, Chair, from the time we have begun this probe, since morning we've been asking how much money have we lost in this one? How much have we lost? And people have confessed here the amounts of money that we have lost. And for me, that we cannot separate that from capacity of workers. So the reason I'm saying I found it odd for someone to say they are being asked an unfair question is to think that because the names, they had good marks from the university, they did this, you said all those things. And for me, I am finding it hard to believe that it is only people that are related to you that were excellent at that. And I'm not asking you to answer back, but I'm just putting it on record that there was nothing unfair about asking those questions, because we need to be clear about what the HR policy talks about, whether you declared when he didn't have full qualifications. You may not have the information now, but I think as a committee we'll need that information. Thank you.
Chair, thank you, Honorable. Chair, I have the information about Geoffrey's recruitment, Sajabi. I have, it's in the minutes of 1st November 2017. Chair, like I said earlier, we submitted all these minutes. On page 32 of those minutes, I see a resolution here on the appointment of the head of business and of specific interest to the question which has been raised. I note here that the board resolved to appoint Mr. Geoffrey Sajabi as the head of business with immediate effect. The members observed that Mr. Geoffrey Sajabi was undertaking an MBA course and directed management to encourage him to complete his MBA. So, Chair, my reading of this is that there was disclosure. The board was conscious of that situation when they made the decision. Then on the question of the number of staff cases, right now we have a total portfolio of civil litigation of 53 cases, 14 of which are employee related. Chair, we had earlier undertaken to share the details, the amounts, the value at stake, and the cases that have been concluded. We lost one recently, Naziwa. We'll share those details, Chair. Then on the issue of the human resource policy manual provisions, Chair, I kindly request that you allow me to refer to the policy. We do have conflict of interest.
To answer the question that you asked earlier on the geo
And just
mapping.
for record purposes, this question was about geo-mapping.
Yes.
And the subsequent collapse of that package or bid.
So 85% of the money was paid. That is 749 million in regard to the work that had been done. 132 million was withheld because within the contract there was a provision that that percentage would be held until all the employers are mapped. So I can confirm that the payment that was made is less by 132 million. Chair, the other request that I wish to make specifically to the Honorable was left.
Before you go there, let's finish this.
My department are related to me. My department has 350 staff. So the names that were read, Chair, could not constitute 80%. I just thought I should say that because the next headline would be that 80% of the people that
I think the honorable member meant 80% of those that were read, not necessarily the 80% in your department. Honorable Kayemba.
On record, Geoffrey Kayemba Solo, representing Bukoma Simbi South. My question goes to the head marketing. Were the action plans for the corporate social investment money, and that was 9 billion, developed? Because this was one of the conditions that were given to you by the board. If they are developed, can you give them to us?
Thank
1
you.
billion, sorry, not 9, 1 billion.
It was 1.8.
That's an interesting question. I would say no.
They were not to be developed.
To my knowledge, they were not, because the department strategy for 2022-2023 actually has a corporate social responsibility budget of 950 million. And that budget actually is clearly spelled out. The objectives are aligned to the policy which has been submitted, and the areas are clearly defined. The policy talks about education, it also talks about health, it talks about youth and disadvantaged. And all these initiatives are clearly mapped in the department's annual work plan during the budgeting process. And so the 950 million has a work plan. I am not aware of a work plan for 1.8 billion.
When the budget goes to finance, it is generated by you, a budget that affects your department. Is this true?
Yes, it is.
Did you forward this budget to the finance department?
The 1.8?
Yes.
No.
So it was
actually,
smuggled
if I
in?
just let me explain how we develop an annual strategy at the fund, just to give context. So in my department, usually we start with the unit budgets. So every unit, and at the moment I have 3 units, has a mini strategy session, and they look at the objectives for the year, and these objectives speak into the broad 4 objectives for the fund. So I have public relations that also takes care of CSR, digital media, and events, and corporate social responsibility. Then I have marketing and brand. They also take into consideration brand building activities and communication. Then product development and research.
Barbara,
so this unit,
Barbara,
yes, please.
Should the 1.8 have gone through your department before finance?
I honestly don't know about the 1.8.
I am asking about the procedure.
Yes, it would have, but I don't know about the
I don't
budget.
want here it would have. Should it have gone through your department before going to finance?
Yes, it should have.
Did it go through your department or not?
I don't have that record, Chair.
So it was forged by finance?
Chair, that's
what do you think we should do to such people who are using, usurping your authority?
Chair, budgeting is a process, and there are various centers. So within the department, then EXCO, then the board. So at least from my knowledge and understanding, by the time we had the EXCO strategy session, we didn't have the 1.8.
Do you remember what you told us in the previous meeting?
Yes, I do. Maybe you can remind me, because there were several things we talked about.
Do you remember all of you confessing that you were under pressure?
No, I didn't say I was under pressure. I said I know about the 950, perhaps the our
I remember very well that meeting. You are the one actually who told us it was now investment. You said originally your budget was much low.
It is.
But this time round there was a lot of pressure and the budget has become much big.
Chair, those were not my words.
Okay, now tell us your words.
My words are, my budget is 950 million, and I wasn't aware of the 1.8. Perhaps the MD could explain, and the previous MD. That's what I said.
Can we have Mr. Biarugawa? Are people forging budgets in departments? Because if at all it is proved that that phone, that message and breakdown was sent by finance, and HR has denied ever seeing this, it means the finance department is forging budgets and will be held liable. Budgets that should have gone through the respective departments.
Mr. Chair, for the 11th time, I would like to say that CSI rather than CSR was a new innovation that the fund board had come up with. So the the board of directors asked us to include a budget to be able to enable the fund be relevant to its community. That's where the CSR budget arose. That information was obtained and given to the finance department, who then allocated it. And if you recall, in the letter that I wrote to the minister explaining the detailed budget, I specifically talked about the 1.8 billion shillings.
Which letter is this?
It's the one that I wrote to the minister at the time of budget approval.
So the marketing boss, Barbara, was not aware of this money. Mr. Byarugam.
Well, that's what she's saying now, but I don't know if she shouldn't have been aware of it.
So who was going to implement this budget if it had been passed? Because anyway, it was passed. Who implemented this budget? Because some money has already left.
Actually, no, not really on this particular part.
Okay, who is supposed to implement it?
It is actually marketing.
She's the one supposed to implement it.
Yes, certainly with the financial literacy of the union, she's the one who is responsible for that. I'm actually surprised she's saying that.
Okay, I have no further questions.
But Chair, about that, we're here with is it one of the leaders at the unions, and he told us and confirmed that 100 million, which is part of the 1.8, because out of the 1.8 we got information that 800 was to be apportioned to the two unions, COFTU and NOTU, and in all the 4 quarters of the financial year. Quarterly, 100 million each union. And 100, we confirm that it was already sent to the accounts of the unions. So my question is, if the head HR,
no, head marketing.
I mean head marketing, I think if head marketing is not aware and we see transactions going and money was picked, so did you get engaged, Barbara, did you get engaged with the unions in this financial literacy? Because they have already withdrawn the money.
Honorable Amos, she may have forgotten what she said last time, but she actually attended one of the events organized by one of the unions. But maybe she forgot. 3
Yes,
actually.
I confirmed. Okay.
More
Chair.
Share more information. Okay, but finally.
Yeah.
Honorable Kake, we have something?
Said that the budget for CSR was 1.8, and you said 800 is for the unions, and 1 billion is the one for the corporate social investment, and now you're saying otherwise. Can we put you under oath?
Chair, thankfully there was a recording. Even last time we were live on air. I would really be glad to watch that recording again, because I do remember what I said on this matter. I said our department has a budget of 950 million shillings. The MD does have a budget. The MD and DMD's office, they have a budget for donations within their docket. That budget sits with the MD's office. It does not sit with my office. So I can fully account for the 950 million shillings, which is in my budget. And if you ask any person here who is in finance, they can give you the budget allocation for the department. I think that record is available. We don't need to, we can definitely just ask a finance person to confirm the line item for corporate social responsibility, and they can also confirm where the 1.8 billion actually is seated, because every head of department has
so
a budget.
Tell us, where is it seated?
It is seated with MD, DMD's budget. It's not in my department.
Mr. Ayot, is this true? Are you the one seated on this very good money?
Yes, what she's described is right, that she has a CSR department that sits with her.
This new one of investment, you are the one in charge.
Yeah, right now I'm in charge.
Okay, that's all we want.
Yeah.
Finance, can you confirm how much was spent on the consultant that went and did research when the board members wanted to increase their emoluments? It's just quick.
I believe the board stated the consultant was Japheth Kato.
So the board gave you directives on which consultant to use?
First, as a disclaimer, I am responding in the capacity of the absent CFO, so I cannot confirm on those details.
DMD, which consultant did you hire?
Now, from what I've heard was Japheth Kato Consult, JKC Consult, yes.
What was the process? Was it direct procurement?
Chair, I can answer because I'm the user, because it was a board procurement. The process went through a procurement.
Does the board procure?
No, it was a procurement done by the board secretariat, the user department, on behalf of the board. So there was a procurement process, and our procurement colleagues would confirm.
Procurement. How much determine who was going to do this?
Honorable Chair, we contracted through a competitive process. The firm already mentioned is correct. The contract was 68 million.
Was it open bidding?
Restricted.
Restricted. Who
Yes.
gave you the name of the company?
We used a shortlist, but also in consultation with the legal department.
So they are the ones who selected.
The firms? No, they give us the proposals, and we also use the knowledge.
Okay.
We've shared the contract details to the secretariat.
Can you give us those contracts?
We've already sent them to the email.
Clerk, do you have this contract? Okay, can we have the last two people? Honorable Kakembo.
What was your role in the Mastercard project? This committee is interested in knowing what role you played in advising legally on terms and conditions, because here they are not very clear on what you agreed upon, the checklist for those who want to do due diligence, because I'm seeing savers' money was put at risk in this project. What was your role specifically in this project?
My role was to the extent that the proposal was presented to the board by the Deputy Managing Director. So it was presented for consideration and approval. I took the minutes. And thereafter, one of my team, part of my team, sit on the project. There's a project, what do we call it? Project steering committee. So my team is represented on that committee that concluded the contract, and which was eventually executed. And at this point, that's the best I can say on that issue. Thank you.
I have a feeling that you participated in the drafting of the agreement between the fund and the organization of Mastercard. Am I right?
Not directly, through my team, yes, because I'm responsible for my team's actions, yes.
And among the terms and conditions, do you mind sharing some of them with the committee?
Chair, I would need to look at the contract. I think it was concluded 2020. I would need to refresh my memory.
And I'm
but
sure
it was also availed to the committee, Chair.
And the saver's interest was majorly.
I beg your pardon?
Yeah, the saver's interest
In as far as the funding is concerned, I'll just speak, but I'll request the DMD, because he's really the man at the center of this, to
Why
speak
I'm
about
asking
it.
this, honorable members and chairman, is that under such circumstances, the developer of the software always, they agree to come, to escort their software to the organization.
Chair, can I seek for clarification? Mastercard Foundation is about the high innovator.
Okay.
I'm not sure whether that's what I was responding to.
Great, I understand.
Thank you.
Honorable Masawa.
It is about the Mastercard Foundation. Which department is supposed to implement that?
Within the strategy department, we've got a unit, an innovation unit that basically handles the Mastercard Foundation.
Does that department need additional funding to run that project?
Does it need additional funding?
Yes.
No.
No.
Yes.
How about the $100,000 that you've included in the budget of Mastercard Foundation? And this is described as administrative overhead cost in managing.
Oh yeah, no, what happens is, remember it is a partnership and a matching. So one of the things that we needed was to build certain capacities, especially within the hubs, for the simple reason that within the hubs, we realized that the business hubs in Uganda actually are struggling a lot. We want them to recruit startups. We want them to train them, but most of them lack the capacity to do that. So after our first year in discussing with them, we then talked with Mastercard and said, can you give us additional funding for this so that we can actually extend these services to the hubs?
Mastercard is giving you that money?
Yes.
It is?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I've seen where Mastercard is giving you, but I'm looking at your budget, where you're appropriating money for that. Don't talk about the one of Mastercard. I'm talking about the one coming from the fund.
Yeah, what you have is a matching grant. When you look at the 4 billion that was set up in the what we talk about, the CSR side of it, that 4 billion was the fund's match to that. At that point, the projection was for an exchange rate of around 4,000 to the Uganda shilling.
No, that's not right. The rate is 3,710.
No.
According to your document.
In our budget. In our budget.
Yeah, I'm looking at your budget. I've computed the figures and I have them.
No.
The $1 million and the one.
No, honorable. Yes. I think the budget we have for the fund assumed a certain rate because you are projecting ahead. The budget for the Mastercard was basically using almost the current rate, because that was supposed to be something that was being transacted there, and then so use the current rate for that purpose. The one for the fund was projecting what the rate could be. So there are two different ones.
When you look at your budget,
yes,
you're contributing 1 million to the Mastercard.
Correct.
Which is 3,710 million.
Correct.
Then $100,000, which is 371 million shillings.
Correct.
Altogether combined, it's the 4 billion, 4.0811.
Correct.
Is that right?
Correct.
So I'm looking at the 100,000.
Right.
What is it going to do?
Okay. So we do have...
Because Mastercard Foundation is already providing funds from their end that will do this training and this...
Correct.
Yes.
That's very true. One of the things that we are building now, especially that we need for the high innovator program, is when you have 100 startups and you're beginning, because everything we've been doing has been manual, we can't have been doing things manually. We have to begin to build now capacities to help us be able to track most of these things automated.
Yes. Deputy, you brought it out clearly.
Yes.
That capacity building to run that program, Mastercard Foundation is the one providing, and I've seen they have appropriated $250,000 for that. I'm looking at the money that you've included in your budget.
I've just said, if you look at the hubs, there are different pieces of this. The hubs, the training, the capacity building, Mastercard is taking care of that. We have to build certain systems to help us automate that process, which we're doing from our internal side.
Alluding to the fact that all the members under him are his relatives, I did say that out of the names that were read to you, 80%, and I think that was a quick sampling, by the committee. So 80% of the names that were read to you, not your entire department.
Lastly, and that is the last, Honorable Baka.
Much Chair, I raised just 3 questions. Briefly, I was looking at this paper from NSSF. Now, item number 1 was about projects written off. Then another item was about donation. To be generous is good, but to be over generous can be dangerous. I'm looking at this workers' money. I looked at an item of COVID-19 donations. I wanted to know clearly which institutions of workers where this money was going. And that was 161 million. There is support for COF Congress. God forbid, to be a trade unionist, to be a member, you subscribe monthly. And all activities of unions are run depending on that money we subscribe. Do you want to tell me that out of the 45 unions that hold congresses, you are supposed to be funding them? Why COF here? And that was 5 million. There are so many, but I just picked on the 3 of interest. Labor Day sponsorship, Hotel African Limited. That Hotel African Limited, 15 million. Labor Day, we decide where to go. Either to a national field, if it is in Kololo, we go to Kololo. If it is at a district, we go to the district. Can I know this sponsorship of Hotel Africana Limited, 15 million? And why not other hotels? Colleagues, you can see where we are getting concerned. I said to be generous is good, but to be over generous, even a woman becomes dangerous. Yes. Can I get explanation for that?
No. Packages, it is still pending, Milton.
Thank you. But we had 2 packages for people who are going to leave. And I know there is a paper like this which was shared with you, which we shared. But let me just recap it quickly. There were 2 scenarios upon which people could leave the organization. The first scenario is where an employee is not impacted by the change, i.e.,
just to be certain, that is the one we talked about of Chigo? Or this is a different one?
No, this is the Chigo one. These are the packages we announced to staff at Chigo. So there will be employees who are not impacted by the reorganization. They still have their jobs, or they have a job at the fund. But because of the many changes that are happening ahead of us, high leverage of technology, high agility, all the changes happening, somebody would put up their hands and say, thank you for the job you've offered me, but I don't want to be part of your journey going forwards. Can you please allow me to go? So that group of people, we gave them okay to go, and they went under package 1. Package 1 is where people got 1 month's salary for every year worked, and they set another amount of money. Yeah. So there is package 2. Yeah, there is package 2. Now, package 2 happens when an individual, we call it an individual who is burnout, we call it burnout. There are people who have grown in the fund, they have developed their comfort zone, and the way things are going, they are not people who are going to continue delivering value for the fund and its members going into the future. So in such a situation, if the employee volunteers to leave and the fund wants them to leave as well, that package is called package 2. We're almost encouraging people who are burnt out to leave. That package is a little bit more generous. So they get package 1, which was the 1 month salary, the notice in lieu and all that. But in addition to that, they get an additional month's salary. So that gives it 2 months. We had what we call a sweetener, Because part of the things you do with managing change is you want to do it quickly. You know, there's too much. No, that's still package 2, an enhancement to it. We said we want people who want to leave to apply within this number of days, this window. So for those who applied within that window, we gave them what we call early bird. That's like a sweetener to encourage people to. So that was.
Center project meant to be completed, and how much did we spend on it?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Learning Center project started about 2018, and it was supposed to be done by a year later. It was supposed to be a 16-month project. As per the paper, the details of it have been circulated to members.
How much did we spend?
So far, we've spent...
On the project, how much did we spend on the project?
Let me see if I can get the exact numbers. The total project was supposed to be 3 billion.
3 billion.
3 billion.
How much have we lost in the space that has not been used?
Let me have the actual numbers here, Mr. Chairman. The question is, how much have we lost in the space?
Yes, because you invested
Yeah.
in this learning center.
Yeah.
It was supposed to take about 1 year, 12 months, I presume.
Yes.
It has taken ages up to now. We are losing, first of all, because the savers' money should be making money, should be generating interest. We have lost, okay, let's assume the 3 billion as well, because it's not generating interest. But we have also lost money in the space we have not used. So I want to know, and the Honorable Committee wants to know, how much is this money?
Sorry, thanks, Mr. Chairman. The exact amount of money we've spent would be maybe about 2.1 billion so far.
I want to know how much we have lost. I know the project was 3 billion.
Yes.
How much have we lost?
To be honest with you, the actual loss in terms of space, which could have been rented out, I think our guys in investments would know the numbers better. But it's true. It's true that space could have generated income for the fund. But if I can spend half a minute, Mr. Chairman, to just say why the project has delayed the way it did. Because as soon as we commissioned Rocco to do the project for us at the beginning of 2000, that's when COVID happened and everything was put on hold. So
this was 2018.
No, the actual contract of signing it was 21st of December. Where is the paper here? The actual signing was December 30th, 2019, as per the thing. So when Rocco commenced work, and then COVID came in, we lost several months because construction wasn't allowed until a little bit later when the president opened it up. But sadly, even when construction was allowed to resume, it turned out that the contractor, Rocco, didn't have the money to execute the project. So they kept on requesting for extensions to the MD, which the MD granted severally, until close to 1.5 years towards 2 years of delay. The MD, on advice of legal and on advice of all of us, decided to invoke a clause to charge demurrage where a project is delayed due to a fault of the contractor. So Rocco was charged slightly over 70 million as per the clause, which they paid. And once they did that, they even still didn't have money to finish their part of the job. So like we explained in this write-up, an arrangement was agreed with them that part of the money that was remaining in their balance, the fund would pay their suppliers directly so that the materials that were outstanding are brought. So the fund paid, and so Rocco finally finished their job. We are now on phase 2, and very sadly, phase 2, which should have been completed 2 or 3 months ago, the current contractor is exactly in the same dilemma like Rocco. from the advice I get from our project team, is that they seem to have underquoted to win the contract. Now that they have the contract, the money is not enough for them to execute the job. So lots of things happened, but in summary, Mr. Chairman, that's the dilemma we have had to deal with.
So you are going to vary again and add more money to this contract?
I don't know what we are going to do, because that has to take a lot of advice from our legal team. It has to take a lot of advice from the project team. But the most likely thing, I think, and I know there are two opinions, because the discussion is already happening. One opinion is to terminate the contract for failure to deliver, because the guy signed that they will do the job for a certain price. They have failed to do it, so terminate and get somebody who can do it. The other option would be to consider within the provisions of the law if there can be a variation to enable them to complete the job. So far, I don't know what the final decision will be, but we'll have to take advice from the technical experts who are more...
Okay, how much did we lose investment? Have we lost in that space?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think there is an opportunity cost in terms of in terms of the revenue you'd have made by letting out the space. But the moment the decision was taken by management to have a learning center, it ceased to be a matter for investments. Now it is, up to the project team that is running the learning center.
Can you please tell us how much we have lost?
Okay, so this is the thing, Chair. That space is about 1,000 square meters. No, 500 square meters. Yeah, it's about 500 square meters. So we charge rent of about $14 per square meter.
How much?
$14 per square meter.
This is per month?
Per month, yeah. So it is 14 times 500 times 12 times the number of years that the project was supposed to be executed. That would then lead you to what the amount would be in terms of the opportunity cost.
So that's 6 billion on a conservative estimation. Honorable members, questions?
The first issue is with the human resource, head of human resources. Is it people and culture something? How do you call it?
People and culture. So I'm called Chief People and Culture Officer.
Good. So you are the one?
That's me, yes.
The two issues, one is entirely yours. The second one will be between you and the head of business. I will begin with yours. From the interactions we've had, we've discovered there is some big loss of money, colossal sums of money in litigations from staff. We are even seeing from board. Either people are living in unclear circumstances, we have to pay them this, others have to take us to court. Talk of the case of the former Deputy MD, Geraldine Sari. I want to ask you, as head of human resource management, what mechanisms we have in the fund to handle such disputes, considering the fact that under Article 40, 3 and 29, 1E of the Constitution, provide for organized labor under unions, and that gave rise to the Public Service Negotiating, Consultative and Dispute Settlement Machinery, the Act of 2008. And all these provide for consultative committees, among other things, you are aware. I want to know if in the fund we have such committees to handle such labor disputes, to avoid those colossal sums of money we are losing as the fund? First respond to that.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the question. I think let me explain the process that leads to termination or dismissal of a staff at NSSF. Usually, if an issue comes up that indicates that a staff has grossly violated the rules of employment as spelled out in the HR policy manual, what we usually do is to send the staff on suspension. We work with our audit department to do a thorough investigation of the case. And if the investigation is done, the policy requires us to put together a disciplinary committee, which is chaired by myself. That disciplinary committee will arrange a sitting with that staff where the charges against the staff will be laid out to him or her, the offenses, so to speak. The staff will be given an opportunity to respond or explain themselves for each of those charges. And during that hearing, a staff member is allowed to come with a person to give him or her moral support. It could be a fellow staff, it could be his external advisor. Some of them come even with their lawyers. Now, the disciplinary committee, upon hearing the responses of the staff, aligns it with the provisions of the HR policy manual. If the evidence and facts are that...
I want to cut you short.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
sorry. I know that process. What I asked for is whether you have labor dispute consultative committees. What you're talking about is a disciplinary committee, which is in the policy. Do you have committees specifically to handle labor disputes? There may not be issues of that require to go to a disciplinary committee. Do you have those committees set up?
We do have a committee,
okay,
not specifically for labor disputes, but to handle all staff affairs. We call them the staff committee.
Okay.
So if there are any things that need to be improved around staff, we discuss with that committee.
We are looking at minimizing loss to the fund. Do you have an estimate? You may not be to the point. How much money we have lost? First of all, how many cases have we had similar or related to what I'm talking about? And how much money have we lost? Say in the 10 years, the last 10 years, out of paying either people who have gone to court or trying to settle it out of court in case of such labor disputes.
To be honest with you, I don't have that number.
But
what I can tell you is that on average, in a year, we might have 1 or 2 staff cases in court.
And we have to pay them.
I don't know whether we have to pay. A lot of them, the fund has come out of court victorious. There are few of them that the fund has lost. That's what it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some figures related to that. How many cases have you had? How much money have we paid?
That is kept by our legal colleagues because all litigation cases are handled through. So I think they will be able to. Agnes,
Corporation Secretary, would you be able to share that?
Yes, Honorable Chair and members, we will share the information.
Chair, I seek your indulgence, and now that even the Corporation Secretary is involved, but is targeting now head of business. Chair and colleagues, you remember 2 days ago here, I raised a matter regarding recruitment process in NSSF, where it is alleged that when there is a gap, recruitment personnel gaps in a department,